let's see, several people are typing. No L3, Citadel. Architect, when is the Citadel L2 coming out?
What a great question.
That was just my question. He just said when L3. I'm just asking when's L2? When's our own L2 launching?
Hopefully never. We're hoping somebody else's L2 matures and becomes an easy, obvious choice. We're not in the business of building infrastructure. We just want to focus on the game. Let the smart infrastructure people deal with the infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a relevant question right here from Neil. Are you guys sticking with Polygon at this time? Because at this time becomes, I'm going to assume that says because it has one of the only decentralized sequencers. It doesn't at the moment.
Well, it's a slightly more decentralized sequencer than a lot of other L2s. I mean, it's definitely not the single party thing that seems common right now. That was some of the reason for choosing it in the beginning. At this point, though, we're gonna go with whoever has the most mature L2 as we get closer to launch, and retaining EVM compatibility. So I think we should have some good options. Um, Hopefully that answers the question.
Um,
I think someone raised their hand.
oh yeah, here I'll bring him on. I'm good. I invited you to speak. There we go. What's up?
Yeah,
Game?
hi, yeah. Uh, Peter Pan showed you guys really hard in Istanbul. He's he was saying like, okay, so Citadel people are doing something you have never seen or whatever in fully on-chain world. Yeah. So I'm from AW Research. Actually, we are the host for AW Day, like right before AW's Assembly, and Peter Pan is still showing on AW Assembly. So. Yeah, I definitely tried out your games. I believe it's in Dev Connect, right? So there are like 3 computers there, and you can play.
We weren't at DevConnect ourselves and didn't have anything there, but that's cool that people were talking about it.
All right. So yeah, like my first question, of course, it will be like, um, are you guys going to launch something like we never had before?
I think that's kind of the goal. Yeah, I think the goal would be to launch something that's never been done before and not still being done currently, even in the on-chain or autonomous world space. So that's always been kind of the idea.
Yeah. You guys are chats because yeah, I'm in the chat and you guys just made the map editor 2.0 for Skystripe, right?
Oh yeah, I saw Heimdall struggling with that, and so I just fixed it and shared it. But
Yeah. So would you please introduce a little bit more about like what's your approach to make something like never have been done before? I mean like the product designing philosophy or whatever, because I think right now we are still in a very early stage. So the way I actually like assess if a team is solid or the game is solid. It's not about like how many fun I'm going to get out of this game, but actually the approach is what I care about most.
yeah, I mean, in simple terms, I feel like our approach has always been kind of the same. From the very beginning when we started the project. Uh, our pillars have always been that the product and the thing that we're making is going to be decentralized, fully on chain, community first, you know, designed with, player first in mind and equitable, but doing all of that at a level of quality and care and the attention to detail that seems to be lacking in the space. Uh, Yeah, I mean, the approach is, it can be a very long answer, but I think the short answer is we just really want to make a quality, good product and really, a great game in a virtual world that hasn't existed in before and the way that we're doing it. But I can type up more about that I want to kind of get back to some of the questions people are asking in chat. So feel free to type some more, Gink. I'm going to see if there's any other people who want to ask some stuff. John, you want to read some questions from?
Yeah, thanks for coming up, Gank. Appreciate the question. I see the ships and governance stuff being talked about a little bit. I don't know if Heimdall, you want to speak to that a little bit more.
I think he's madly in the background.
8Ball asked, with ships and governance token being decoupled, how is the team/investor percent that y'all are taking affected? Strictly governance or both governance and ships?
I'll just start out by saying that we haven't solved the governance, what it's going to be yet. I proposed an idea based on hangers. Flame proposed an idea based on characters, but we're still open to ideas. Ideally, the governance asset is still tied to game access. I think that's important for setting sort of a population cap on the game that is sustainably grown, similar to a country. If you don't have a population limit, basically you can get an unsustainable influx of players, which can have negative effects on the economy. Just like in real life. I mean, if you imagine like a small town and then the population increases by like 1,000%, you're gonna have all kinds of social issues, you're gonna have economic issues, you're gonna have a lot of problems. So in my mind personally, and it's not to say for the whole team, but the sustainable growth of the game population means that we can grow the economy better. The current players can grow the social institutions better. And then it just overall leads to, I think, a healthier development of the game state and game economy.
Ian asked, will there be a free-to-play aspect here? If yes, then how will free players have ships with no hanger?
There might be a way. I mean, we've discussed a way for players maybe to share a hanger if that ends up being the way to go. But again, this kind of leads back to the unsustainable population growth. The free-to-play game, you could have an influx of 1 million players overnight. And this can lead to all kinds of problems that are meant to, a game that's meant to have a persistent state economy and a game state. If you let that many players in at once, they can have, they can create all these issues essentially, and then they could leave the game the next day, or they can, there's a lot there. I mean, essentially, each player having a governance asset and access to the game means they care more about the game. If they're just free to play players, they're basically mercenaries and they can extract from the game. They won't care so much about how the game develops and all these things. I don't know if Fleet, you have anything more to add to that?
I mean, yeah, I think it's still like kind of an open question. I have some thoughts on the free to play aspect. In the sense of like the part where it's like, if yes, then how free players play the game. I'm not sure. I don't even know if that will be a thing, but I do think there's still like merit in like the idea that the ecosystem isn't fully closed off, even if you don't have like a governance asset or like a ship or the playing asset. So I like to imagine that, Citadel itself, the virtual world, the economy of Citadel, right? People trading the commodities, things like that. I think that being accessible to people outside of those who are just playing the game and wanting to participate in the markets, and because it's a valuable market and a valuable economy, I think that is like something worth considering. How do people who want to just be, I don't know, traders in the economy? Well, I don't know, Connor, if that makes sense. Like, right, you want people to be able to invest in the economy even if they play a role in the economy. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, the most important consideration is that these players have some sort of buy-in. They're not free to play players. So there might be another model where we can allow other players to come in without a governance asset, but we're still thinking about that.
Yeah. Anyways, let me find another question.
King Fo kind of keeps going with that. He says probably the number one problem with most Web3 games is player adoption and retention. Is there any nuanced strategy to help prevent that? Outside of the obvious, create a fun product.
Well, yeah, so creating a sustainable economy in this space, I think, is one of the most critical aspects of player retention. Obviously, if token go down, players aren't going to stick around for long, even if it is a fun game. People are really thinking about the economic aspects of these games. So yes, we want to create a fun game, but also you want to create a sustainable economy, and therefore that kind of leads back to the population gating with the governance asset. I think it is very important to let the economy develop in a sustainable way. That way we can retain value in the economy. Also, that should help with retaining players because people see, oh, okay, the things are valuable here. This game is working, the game's fun. So I want to stick around. And that's kind of the idea there. Also, if you're gating the population behind a governance asset, you're creating pent-up demand. There's a similar thing happened with EVE Online in the beginning of their game, where they had a publishing dispute where this publisher had bought the rights to release the game through boxed editions, but they wanted to publish it online, but they couldn't because they didn't own the rights anymore, which led to the publisher ended up going out of business or something like that. And there was only 30,000 box editions available. And so all these people were trying to get these boxed editions all over the world, and they were coordinating with each other through, chats online to help each other find them. And this actually led to pent-up demand for the game, and also allowed social institutions like corporations to develop early on in the game that led to the next wave of onboarding. Hilmar actually talks about this in a couple of his podcasts. So gating the population can actually have a net positive effect on social institution development, economic sustainability, and then also creating pent-up demand for new releases of basically citizenship in the game or governance assets.
Yeah, I mean, just to that. Are you adding something to that?
No.
Okay. There's like a question I saw above. Hold on, I wanted to point it out. Blob asked, is the browser game going to be expensive to run? He talks about when he played some other game called Bat, which sounds like a game Blob would probably be playing. It was like a quality browser game, but he assumed it's pretty expensive to run, and they'd make up for it with microtransactions, yada yada. Thoughts on that?
Well, some of the beauty of this is there isn't really a game server that we have to pay to host. The majority of our cost would be in the front end, which is, a fraction of what game companies tend to pay for hosting their backends. So it's like, I guess, the benefit of being on chain.
Ooh.
Nice. Someone asked, are there going to be super rare materials or any different kind of drops, like under 0.01% chance? Think about being super excited that you got it and now you have something super unique and valuable because of your luck.
I read that question. I mean, I think like in any economy, there's rare materials and unique items that are valuable because they're scarce. And I don't think that's going to be any different for the economy within Citadel. Like, there's obviously going to be resources in the game that have a lower supply and distribution. And in essence, I mean, that's going to make them rare. I think in terms of things like maybe if you're thinking about like a Diablo 4, like unique legendary helmet, whatever, that's going to drop from like some mob boss, like maybe like, but I think that'd be extremely rare because the majority of the economy and items and resources and all this stuff in Citadel is we want to be, player driven, meaning that's player made. So there might be some rare items that can't be made and they have to be found. But yeah, I mean, TLDR, yes.
Yeah, I think it's also important to consider, like, okay, so like Diablo 4, the Shaco helm was so rare that players felt like they couldn't even find it. Whereas in Diablo 2, there was really rare drops, but players were able to get them given enough input and, enough skill. So there's an important balance to strike where it still feels attainable, but, also it does feel really special when you get the item that, completes your build. So it's also something that you don't want it to create like idiosyncrasies where like some player gets an item and they're so powerful that no other player can beat them. So like the power level is another consideration with rare items, be they blueprints or materials that allow you to build ships or whatever. But yeah, I think there's definitely room because that does feel really good when you find something that is super rare.
Yeah.
Quickie asked, for asset/user retention will be based on which wallet you connect, by account, by gadget. I assume he means like device. asset retention, like where we are going to store and keep our assets once we're not in the game.
I'm only trying to decipher this question a little bit.
I think, I mean, it's all going to be wallet based, correct?
I think maybe the question is trying to get at are assets basically packaged with your player character with a ship or something, or are they individually owned by a wallet? I'm not sure if that's the question is, but that's kind of the way I took it.
Quickie, if you want to rephrase your question based on some of the words you said and resend it, we'll re-answer it. But for right now, let's move on to another one. Well, I feel like you can elaborate further what he means.
Right. Yeah.
What kind of skill cap do you guys expect from Push Citadel? We want there to be very a high skill cap ceiling because I think that's valuable, right? Like it should be player skill, not pay to win or just botted, right? Like it should be a challenging but rewarding game with reasons for skill to be valuable.
Yep.
That Elliot guy, in regards to the way the protocols and assets and how they'll be locked up beyond a 4-year vesting period for the core team members and investors, will this be part of Citadel's contract or will it be an extended contract? If it's external, is it something the community would be allowed to look over? Sorry if I haven't worded that very well. No worries.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of whether it's packaged with the Citadel or not, I mean, I don't think we're gonna immediately bundle it into the rest of the game. I think everybody's gonna have the chance to review it when we submit that when we agree on the service contract with the DAO. So yeah, I mean, it will be audited. Everybody will have a chance to look over it and decide whether they want to accept it.
Micropene talked about wasn't the predicted equilibrium player count around 17,000, and he's guessing that's no longer predictable with the extensive changes. No, I mean the original number in 1.0, the 17,000, where that came from was based on the growth of ships through the weekly auction and the rate of destruction of ships from player activity. That was the number of total alive ships where the weekly auctions would not outpace the destruction of ships in 1.0. So that was kind of where like met equilibrium. Obviously, that was based on the very initial version of the game, or even 1.0 was designed to change and develop over time. So that number is really more like, okay, cool, there is like a stable point and things aren't going to just go off the rails forever. So it wasn't really meant to be referenced as like a player count of around 17,000. That was just 17,000 ships. And it kind of, would meet some balance around there. But for 2.0, yeah, I mean, it's going to be really different in terms of predictability. I think it'll be probably easier to predict once we start modeling the economy and tools like Machinations and getting into the weeds of that stuff. But that's not the stage we're at the moment.
Yeah, I'll just add. Yeah, so just everything Jackson said is correct. The auction was never meant to just be a static value, and so that was the number that we found. Okay, like you said, the equilibrium where the ships released equal to ships burned, but the auction was meant to be dynamic, so it would make no sense for us to just cap it off at 17K. If more people wanted to play the game, we would increase the auction would increase the number of ships released so that it could go past 17K. So similar thinking here with the current design, I guess, is that it doesn't really matter what that number is, as long as the backing of the governance asset is relatively stable, the player number could relatively increase as much as needed. It's not really an issue. If more people want to play the game, then we increase the supply. If less people want to play the game, then we decrease the supply. Yeah.
Corsair Lost asked about if renting out your hangar or ships in the hangar is an aspect of the game. How do you guys envision this happening, or have you talked about this internally? Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a lot internally. I think the reality is like it's going to be the equivalent of renting out like your car right? Like it's just going to be like kind of a normal economy. Like if you own a ship and you want to let someone borrow it, like your friend, for free, you just hand it over to them because you know you're gonna, trust them to get back. If you want to rent it up on to like someone you don't know, you're gonna want some like trusted system or third party or who knows, or some contract, maybe some, some a down deposit, yada yada. So a system like that in game being either built by us or somebody else, I think that'd be the way. So I think it'd be pretty equivalent to how you rent out things normally, uh, in general.
I would like to add.
Yeah, go for it. Add whatever you want.
Yeah, I think the problem here, and something to consider when we're considering ideas of renting things out. First of all, is we probably can't stop people from renting out their hangars, right?
I don't know.
But the problem is, if you look at in real life, people just accumulating houses and renting them out and becoming slumlords. I mean, that's not something you want either. You don't want that happening. So balancing the centralized ownership of hangars where people are just renting them out to make free yield is probably not something you want in the game. You want a more decentralized ownership, therefore you have more alignment with people playing the game in the game. So
Yeah, I think the design of whatever the governance asset is would probably take into account that it's not EV positive to rent this out, or it doesn't benefit doing so. Ships, though, I mean, and the comment of what Heimdall said about houses, like when you rent your ship out to like a tenant in real life, they might damage your floors, but they're not going to blow up your house. But ships in Citadel can be blown up, so I think it's a little bit less of a concern with renting there because things have, they're tangible objects and they're easily destroyed by other players, and there's a lot of risk towards renting them out.
definitely.
Is the initial asset still being capped at 3,333? I was asked by Taken Miner's lunch money. No, we don't know what the supply is at the moment, how it's going to be capped, how it's going to be designed. That stuff we're kind of, I mean, we have a bunch of ideas and things we want to do internally, but I think that supply was really, that's designed around 1.0 because we're on 2.0. I think there's a lot of meaningful and reasonable adjustments that can be made that are better for everyone and growth and things in general. Considering we want ships to be player made as like, from the onset of the world, I think there's a lot of discussion and thinking to go into how supply works. Razzle asked, how do you protect the economy from bad actors like bots who are just interested in extracting from the game? Well, skill cap, but I think you have enough brains to answer this one, Mr. Architect.
Well, in some ways, we benefit from the fact that information is localized. I mean, you only know what's around you. And the point is making it basically the same thing to run a bot as to play the game yourself. It's risky. It's not immediately obvious what the correct decision is. There is no inherent advantage in having like a faster reaction.
Yeah. Because there's, I don't know, Flam, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what Max said, risk is, I think, one of the best anti-bot defenses you can have in a game like this, because if your bot is exposed to risk at the same level as anyone else is, it's just not going to make sense to have your bot go like mining resources somewhere where they could just get blown up or something. So basically, I think, at least for the foreseeable future, I don't know what's going on with OpenAI and AGI, who knows what, but as far as we know, players are still going to be at the higher end of the skill cap for the foreseeable future. And as long as that's true, it's always, and these ships and all these things in this world have value, and you care about that value, it's not going to make sense to just YOLO your stuff out with a bot very often.
Yeah, I mean, there will be bots, without a doubt. People will try, some will succeed. That's not necessarily a bad thing either. I think the most obvious and common place bots will exist are areas in the game that are low skill, easily repetitive, and just like trivial to automate. And so that's most likely going to be like resource collectors, which I think just goes, hand in hand with like, okay, well, just got to balance with the risk there to make sure that's not just so like risk free, so that people aren't having such a comfortable, easy, low hanging fruit of like, yeah, I can scale to 1,000 ships just mining this asteroid field and be perfectly safe because there's no risk involved. In Eve, people, bought a ton with like mining ships. They still get caught all the time and killed by people. There's ways to catch them, but they're always like adding some extra things to try to make it better for themselves, the bots. So I think again, just to summarize, there will be bots, but the best tool against them, I think, is localized information and balancing risk for the game. So that's something that like we're very actively interested in and care about. Sanic asked a completely theoretical situation. How much money would it take for an L2 to give to the DAO, the team, a grant to come to that L2? Probably extremely high, because
I mean, technically, I don't think we should be the people even making that decision. I would say that if that were to happen, that'd have to happen after launch, and the community would have to decide whether it's worth it.
yeah, I mean, also, if it's a shit tier L2 and they have a ton of money to hand out because they got big bags, like it's a fully on-chain game. Like it matters, the underlying tech. So it doesn't really matter about the money there. It really more matters about how this is going to impact the game and if it's going to make things actually better or make it worse. Like if we were on Polygon and Polygon had the first ideal decentralized sequencer and nobody else did, and some other brand new L2 came along with like a big bag of money and was missing like fraud proofs and had bad tech and had no decentralized sequencer and whatever and yada yada. It's like, yeah, it doesn't matter. There's nothing that's just completely a big loss.
Yeah, the 10 mil.
10 mil.
I think that's too low, brother.
Yeah, too low. Anyways, good question. Will the initial drop of ships still have a chance of getting a rare, minor, or marauder? Corsair Lost asked. Blam, do you want to answer that? Because you know my answer, but I think you don't want me to talk about it.
I'm actually not sure what you mean. So why don't you say what
cool.
you're going to say without saying what you were going to say?
Okay, I'll try my best. So in my mind, I think the initial, I'm going to assume initial drop of ships means mint, right? In my mind, I think, again, this is my mind. I just want to clarify, it's not the team. These are not our plans. It's not confirmed. But I think it'd be ideal and potentially worthwhile to consider that the initial mint of ships, if there is one, or whatever the initial, ships that people get from the mint of whatever the mint is, say, is that everyone starts off in the same exact relative ship. Maybe there can be different types and they look different and maybe do slightly different things, but the general basis is everyone has an equitable start in the world. And it's basically just like a rookie ship, like it's a starter ship. It's not, you're not going to be spawned into the world being part of the 1% with some crazy ship. I mean, even if we did do that, you'd probably lose it because you don't know what you're doing. And, one really rare ship getting ganged up on like by 1,000, I don't know, the equivalent of like, you have a really buff guy. Imagine you spawn in the world as like just a major Chad, big muscles, like good for you. You know anything about the world, and then imagine like 1,000 10-year-olds, circle you. Doesn't matter how big your muscles are, you got just crushed. So yeah, maybe there still is some sort of rare drop where people get a different ship starting out for some reason. I think it's kind of irrelevant because they're probably going to lose it. So I think it's best that everyone starts out with the same ship in like some equitable way, and that it's like a rookie ship, right? And people build up the resources and craft and manufacture the different types of ships and sell them to other players or who knows what. But I think that'd be a more fun start to the game. That's just my opinion, though. It's not confirmed. Who knows? Anyways, moving on. Did I say it or did I not say it, Flam?
I think you said it.
All right. Um, Zozer asked 2 questions. 1, are you considering non-EVM chain as well? 2, was there a huge change in the tokenomics economy of the game since the time that you worked at Machinations? 1, I'll let Architect answer.
At the moment, no, we're planning on sticking to an EVM chain. I think we have pretty strong conviction that whatever does mature, whatever matures first will likely be an EVM chain. I feel that it's better to follow the standard than to try to deviate from it. However, I mean, if somebody comes around and gives us a really good reason to consider a non-EVM chain, that would be a different question. But that doesn't seem to be how it is right now.
Yeah, I mean, to quickly answer 2, yeah, obviously there's in our most recent update we talked about how like everything has changed when it comes to the economy. We don't have tokenomics, right? There's an OR token. No one gets any of it. Not ourselves, not investors, nothing. Like the tokenomics chart is just one group. And it's 100% the game. So anything like OR is only generated by player activity in the game. So we don't have tokenomics, but we have economics, and the economy and the economic design of 2.0 is, it's all based on the same ideas of decentralized, equitable, community player first, and sustainability, and based on like real economics. And so, like we said in the last update, like, yeah, there's a lot of changes there, but that's just because it's a different game. We're still going to be doing tons of auditing and tons of math and really making sure this thing is good. But right now, we're just mostly focusing on the gameplay and the game and player experience. Obviously, in the back of our minds, and as we're going about everything, we're thinking about the economy of the game and its design. But in terms of like auditing that and building out the models, we're probably going to wait a little longer until we kind of play tested a ton of features and things that we all want together as a community, and before we get to that stage. Anyways, this is a great question from Asu. Are there going to be things like daily/weekly quests and an energy mechanic, in quotations, that limits how much someone can grind? No, that sounds awful. That sounds like a mobile game. That we would not do that. Play to your heart's content. And yeah, you can ask as many questions as you want, King. Anyways, Neil asked about an emblem creator for ships and whatnot. I don't know. Danny, what do you think about like some sort of like in-game emblem creator for corporations or player groups or ship load, stickers for the ships, something like that?
Yeah, we are not. We didn't think about so much of a editor right now, but we definitely want some kind of like a way to have the ships display a player emblem, but we're not entirely sure how we're going to do that. But yeah, we definitely want something like that the players can say, okay, this is mine, this is my ship, this is like some level of customization. Those are the
Yeah.
goals, but as to how it will be done, no idea. To be honest, we'll have to look into it in the future.
Yeah, later down the road. Physics. I don't know if you have any questions that I've missed or that are standing out that you want to ask, but maybe you can pick a few next.
Yeah, sure. Down lower, Gingas, based on the showcases we've seen, it's just so smooth, seamless gameplay. What's your trade-off and solution? I'm assuming he's talking about potentially the on-chain implementation when it's multiplayer, ZK state channels, and also latency issues.
Yeah, ZK state channels is sort of captures the idea. Basically, a lot of things are going to be peer-to-peer by default with a fallback to the contracts. And yeah, there will be a lot of proofs involved. But peer-to-peer is the answer. to keeping things smooth.
Yeah. We'll dive into a lot more of this with detail in the next like few updates. But that's the gist. I mean, in terms of also like smooth, seamless gameplay, like it's rendered, right? Like it's not like obviously there's like a smooth seamlessness on the transaction side and uh action. So we've been putting a lot of work into things like the closed form like physics equations for like movement based stuff so you don't have a bunch of transactions and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, some of it's also using those tricks of basically storing real-time information as static information and then some extra info on how it's going to change. So some things you can just reduce to a single transaction for an apparently real-time effect.
Yeah.
I think Corsair has another question for Danny. Will the factions be there on launch, or will the factions be something that just happens naturally over time?
That's a good question. The way that we're thinking thus far is that there's like a set number of factions, but if they like either split up or if we introduce new factions later on, that's I don't know. That's that's more a thing to see how we'll do in the future. But yeah, we have some ideas for like initial factions, but how the thing evolves, it's again like we will have to discuss it first.
Are there any plans for incentivizing people to contribute to liquidity pools for ore? Elliot asks.
Plans. I think the plan is to make. Well, we don't have any plans yet, but we will say that there's a certain theory about making ore stabilized versus ETH. Whether we can accomplish that remains to be seen. But when assets are stabilized versus each other, it reduces the impermanent loss or divergence loss, as some people say. Or if you were provided liquidity, you would know about impermanent loss. You can look that up if you want. I can't explain it concisely here. But if you reduce impermanent loss, then you just start generating fees. Therefore, people will be incentivized to provide liquidity because they're not worried about impermanent loss. They're just generating fees. The other side of that is that you need high velocity or a lot of trades occurring in the economy for ore swaps for ore to generate more fees. So just basically the plan is create sustainable economy, relatively stable token price. Therefore, people will be incentivized to provide liquidity.
Just like real economics.
Real economics.
Well put.
Cool. G-Gun Thor, how do we pronounce that name? How do you intend to onboard Web2 players considering they are versed of anything tagged Web3 or crypto? It's a great question. I think our first order of business is to onboard the people who are here because it seems like there's hundreds of thousands to maybe millions of people in the Web3 space who would love to play a blockchain game that isn't a grift or some sort of decentralized LARP that isn't actually decentralized or just, I mean, the same experience they can get anywhere else in any other Web2 game. So I'm not really, I wouldn't say we're really concerned with Web2 players at the moment. Like, we are building a very niche product in a very niche market. I think there's an abundance of people who would love that product in this demographic, in this market, who have nothing to do at the moment and really haven't for years. So I think our demographic is basically anyone with a pulse. And I think that's who we're going to try to onboard first in the Web3 space. And I think as the game grows through, player-driven, community efforts and over time, I think that's probably going to be the way that it becomes a thing where people who are Web2 get curious and want to try it out because it's offering an experience they couldn't get elsewhere, whereas all normal blockchain gaming, like AAA blockchain gaming, is just, I don't know, CS:GO with TF2 skins or NFT skins and stuff like that. Like, there's nothing really any different. It's usually just kind of a worse game with extra Web3 blockchain baggage.
I might add here, I think people tend to minimize the amount of Web3 players solely to NFT traders in the market. But I mean, if you just look at Axie right now, I think I looked at it last week. There's like 100K daily active users, something like that. Who knows how many of those are the same player or bots or whatever, but there's definitely demand, especially if you're providing opportunity in a fun game. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't limit it to the current population, let's say, of NFT traders in the market right now.
Let me see. I'm just scrolling through.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I can comment on this question from Fee Commander. Will custom characters such as Fee Commander make it into the game, or are there funny references similar to how Red Shirt Guy made it into WoW? Well, the nice thing about a decentralized game is that the community has the ability to input these things, which is pretty neat. And our whole philosophy on the lore of Citadel from the beginning has been pretty
Canvas.
like, yeah, blank canvas, like soft world building. The community is what creates the drama and the story. The players are what create that, with kind of like a limited foundation of that to start things. But it's really going to be up to the community to make it interesting, and I think they definitely will, given a like player driven world.
Okay. I found a really great question that needs to be asked and answered. It's from Quickie. How strict or loose will your anti-cheat software be? I played a game when the AI detects unusual behavior that the account gets banned right away with no way to revoke. Also, will there be your cause of action for toxic players? If there will be, every game has one, or just let it be as long as the player is playing fair. So, focus. First part of the question is, how strict is our anti-cheat software architect?
Well, we're fortunate to not need anti-cheat software. If you think about the form that cheating takes in most games, it's, I mean, siphoning information that the client has that isn't displayed to the player. But in our case, the information is actually hidden. The client doesn't know anything that you don't, which means that there's not really a way to cheat by getting access to information that you shouldn't have. I mean, there's still the topic of like aim bots and things like that, but I don't think those will be a concern for us. We're not planning any mechanics that would give advantages to those types of cheats. And then in terms of griefing, there are a few ways to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, though, there is, a DAO that could revoke people's ships on bad behavior. So that, I mean, that could be a final catch. I don't know if we have any plans to build in something, I guess easier for.
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of a classic story. Like in EVE Online, when someone in the very early days of EVE, when it first started out, and someone got kind of scammed for the first time by another player in game as they were like trolling in chat and basically offering, being not fully true about the deals and things that they wanted to make, yada yada, and they stole some ships from another player, a big group of players. Everyone was really mad. This is back in like 2006 or 2005 or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, this complaining to CCP, like, this is ridiculous. Like, this guy just completely took advantage of us. Like he had access to the corporation hangars and he just stole the ships, and that's like unfair. He cheated. He scammed us." And people were like on the forums, like trying to get this guy banned. And I mean, the reality though is, it's like what Quickie said. The player was playing fair. He didn't really do anything wrong. He had access to the hangars. He took some ships. He left the corp. That was like all social emergent behavior. He didn't break any of the rules of the game. And so CCP kind of took the stance very early on that, like, that's allowed. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. Lying is a part of the game, especially in a player-driven world. That's why trust is valuable. So that guy wasn't banned, and so toxicity in the sense of scamming in game. I mean, have your wits about you. Don't don't go to any or currency doublers and things like that. Like, but in terms of toxicity for being like, I don't know, mean. I think Tyler the Creator said like just turn off the computer at one point or something like that. Mute him. I think it really depends on case by case action. Like Architect said, there's a DAO, so if the DAO wants to do some witch burning kind of stuff, power to them. But I think we'll have to see how it goes. But if people are playing within the rules of the game, I think the player is, I think the spectrum of toxicity is kind of wide. Anyways,
One thing I'd add on is I don't think this completely addresses the issue, but I do think it does a lot, which is when you have a more player driven world and you give players real tools to self govern and self police themselves, including the use of force, which is critically absent in most of these worlds, you can get pretty far in terms of players self limiting bad behavior.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if there's some bad behavior, go group with your friends and kick the shit out of that guy. Blow the ship up. Hunt him.
Set a bounty.
Set a bounty. Let's see.
Razzle asks, won't there be a safe zone with less rewards but very low risk to lose your ship?
If I think it one of the what's that word? Monikers? Monikers?
Moniker?
One of the monikers of Eve. I think it's kind of true for what Citadel is. Not because they are the same game. I think they're going to be very different in a lot of ways. But Eve is a true MMO where players are the world and players are the game. And Eve is cruel as a world, but it's ultimately fair. And one of the monikers in Eve was always if you undock from any station, you are consenting to PvP because the world is a player-driven world and it's player versus player. That doesn't mean it's always PvP. It just people have gotten blown up in the safest systems in Eve every day for 20 years. There's mechanics that kind of balance it out and make it, not something that's easy to do or what people do, but in a sense of will there be areas with less risk and obviously less rewards? Yeah, of course. But there is always going to be risk in the world. I think that's an important factor of how things should be designed, especially when it comes to an economy. And that is the incentive to, safeguard and make sure what you're doing is safe or build up the defenses so that it is. I don't know if there's more questions.
Yeah, I see another one. RJ asks, would you agree / safe to assume that people can expect a slow burner when it comes to return on their investment to play the game? Interested in how people think launch will go, a big boom in the market, or like I said, slow burner? Rob, dumb question since you mentioned no idea what we should expect for supply and how release is done. Curious what the team thinks / how rapid / gradual popularity will spark.
You should not expect a return on your investment because this is not an investment vehicle. This is a game that you're playing. I will say that the economy will be designed to stabilize, hopefully, the value of the governance asset that you meant, but do not expect any return on your investment. That would be a security.
Yeah, I mean, I think people having expectations for a return on their investment, like that's the wrong thing. The reality is the game is a fully decentralized virtual world that is player driven. The economy is going to be if the economy is valuable, if the game is valuable, then there are valuable things to do within the game, but valuable things come with risk. So, I mean, in EVE Online, you start out with basic ship, right? And you put in time and effort and resources and skill, and the output you get is sometimes getting blown the fuck up and losing a ship, but sometimes you also get better at the game and you make some ISK and you get a bigger ship, or you invest in other ways and you know, grow yourself in the world. So just like any virtual economy in like World of Warcraft or RuneScape or Albion or Eve, uh, there are valuable things to do, and there are valuable things uh, that require an investment of more than just money. It's yourself. And if you play the cards right, you can walk away with more than you walked into in that situation. But I'm talking about like, the game. I think if you're looking to just like invest in Citadel, right, with the idea of a return on your investment, you're probably gonna fucking lose because you're gonna get your shit stomped. Like you don't just people think Eve is play to win all the time, so we'll dump like $100 into Eve and go buy a bunch of shiny modules and shiny expensive ships, and then they have really embarrassing deaths that people make fun of on Reddit, and they do it again, and it doesn't work. So if you want a return on your investment, it's not going to be because of money you put into the game. It's going to be because you put actual effort and skill and time. Honestly, good chance it's really the factor that matters the least is money and you expanding your empire within Citadel.
Right, yeah, like you shouldn't expect to make money just by minting the token or the asset and then just sitting around hoping something happens. I mean, it's just like a real economy. There's going to be opportunity, and if you take advantage of that opportunity, maybe you can receive some value for that, work that you put in. But you need to do things in the economy in order to receive value. Just like in real life.
Yeah, nothing. There's nothing will happen if you don't do anything. So I mean, if you don't do anything, what will happen is you're losing. It's like real life.
Yeah,
Anyway.
not doing anything means dilution in your governance stake. Nibbler in France, where would you guys personally like to see Citadel as a game a year from launch? In terms of narrative growth, things that have happened in the game, player count, etc. Like, what is the ideal situation the game is in for the team after that time frame?
I would love Flam's answer on this.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? Which one is it?
Yeah, it's Nibbler in France, 12:45 p.m. Where would you guys personally like to see Citadel as a game a year from launch? And then he goes on with narrative growth, things that happen in the game, player count, etc. What's the ideal situation?
I mean, I think for one, we'd like it to be if we're talking about a year from actual launch. I think we would like to see a lot of the initial, probably inevitable speed bumps worked out and training wheels that there's not going to be a lot of training wheels, but any that do exist can be mostly done away with, and we can feel like this thing is just existing out there. I mean, I think that's the most exciting prospect to me personally, is that this becomes this self-perpetuating thing that is just out there in the ether, potentially indefinitely, and we feel like we could, be involved or not be involved, and it would just go on being its own thing. That might be a little ambitious 1 year out, but that's like the main target I have in mind for what we're shooting for as quickly as possible. What that could actually look like in practice, what people will be up to, it's really hard to say at this point. Obviously, as much as possible. I think the other sort of threshold I'm thinking about a lot is that there is a line, I think, where we go from it's pretty cool, there's a lot going on, there's things to do, to there's just an endless amount of things going on, and you could never hope to explore it all. And it just feels like it's this totally immersive experience that there's a lot for everyone to find something for. I think it's going to take a little while to get to that threshold where it goes from just being like, okay, there's like 5 main play styles that most people are going to be involved with, to there's just this endless world to explore. I don't know exactly when that will happen, but I do think ideally we would hit that, I don't know, about a year, but hopefully within a couple of years.
Hell yeah. Is the game world still structured in a similar fashion, meaning the 5 original planned zones, or has 2.0 expanded the scope of the game world?
Definitely expanded. Very different. I mean, 1.0 is a top-down map. It's just a coordinate plane, basically. And the regions were just different parameters and behaviors of how, what happened there. I mean, that's regions in general in any game. But yeah, 2.0 is significantly different. One of the ideas that Flam and I really care a lot about when it comes to MMOs is trying to balance and accommodate for the right amount of empty space and low traffic space in a virtual world, so that you don't end up with a big empty world in general that's just kind of lacking players and feels overly large, and then spreads the player base super thin throughout it, because then the content density is extremely low. So one of the ideas that we really are looking into and care about is, ways that the world can expand or contract based on player activity and player behavior naturally. So you still end up with the, reasonably quiet areas that maybe sometimes get loud, but that the world itself kind of adapts and grows just like the real world has in response to the things that players do within it. But yeah, 2.0 is definitely expanded layout, design wise, topology, how the world will be. It's not just 5 regions.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll add on that is just like what Fleet was saying. One thing I think that a lot of Web3 virtual world type of projects have done wrong is add too much space too quickly for too little cost. The thing about virtual space is that it's by definition infinite. And I think one of the challenges we're going to have to figure out is, particularly now that we're bringing, by default, whether we want to or not, by virtue of being on the blockchain, a lot of financialization into the picture, we need to figure out how to make space matter. So I think that means it can't just be there's a ton of it by default and we're going to slice it up. It needs to be right sized to the amount of players, and ultimately there needs to be some kind of filter or investment requirement so that whatever space does exist is meaningful to players. That the space that is in the world, somebody cares about it, which means it's probably going to be inhabited meaningfully. So yeah, I think that's going to be a sort of perennial challenge for all of us in this field going forward.
Nice. Asu asked a question I think is good for especially new members. Are there going to be different servers or just one big server? Is some progress going to be reset ever, for example, season-based progress, in a way that allows players to not feel like they are way behind when they start?
So, in terms of servers, I mean, all of the game state is going to be on chain, and there's going to be a single, consistent state. There won't be a bunch of different copies of the game state, basically. However, for peer-to-peer stuff, people will be sort of kind of running their own servers behind the scenes.
Or using
or letting their corp do it. But
yeah. But in terms of, I mean, it's a fully on-chain game, right? So there's not servers, right? It's a persistent world. That what we want Citadel to be is a big persistent world, and that persistence to expand beyond just the fact of how the world is designed, but the the hardness of the world itself, because it's fully on chain and decentralized and blockchain, in the sense that has that same kind of persistence that Ethereum has itself. So progress being reset once the game is fully like launched, no. But when we're playtesting and stuff like that, yeah, there might be some session-based playtest where it's different, obviously, because we want to test different things. But the world is not going to be the world does not operate in a sense where it's like, I mean, if you're new, it's not immediate that you're going to be like feeling behind because you started later than someone else. I mean, you have to think about it the same way that the real world works and economies. Like, you were born at some point, all of us were, but there are people who were born way before us and had a head start. A lot of things, but kind of the ideal aspect of Citadel is that it has the agency like a real world does to grow and develop and expand because the people who inhabit it like the real world. Whereas most virtual worlds in the past have been like theme parks or solely controlled by one centralized party like a company, the growth is really, or expansions usually only, as a result of profit seeking and just a company doing company things, where ideally we have a world doing world things because people are within that world. So if you start later, it's not necessarily going to be like you're forever behind, because it's not really like that. Obviously, the more time you put into anything, you're going to be ahead of someone who has less time in it.
Yeah, and this question is fundamentally an economic mobility question. So how easily somebody can, progress to a high standard in the game, and that it doesn't feel daunting when you join the game, that you feel like you'll never be able to reach that level. So yeah, we are definitely considering economic mobility as an important and critical factor of the economy, the game economy, and how we're designing it. So yeah, like there's this game Entropia where you join it and they have like a real world, real money economy. But when you join the game, you're basically like poor, and you feel like unless you put a ton of money into the game, you can never experience what other players are experiencing. And that's something we definitely want to avoid. In Eve, like a new player could join the game. He joins a corporation. He can move his way up the ranks just by adding value to that corporation. He could even become like a fleet commander, let's say, over time. And so we want to emulate something similar where players feel like they can join the game, and if they add enough value and players see that value, then they can progress through the ranks and become a highly regarded player, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes down to the fact that we want to build a true, in quotations, MMO, where players are the content and players are the world. You're not falling behind because you have 100 quests to do that someone's already done. The emergent behavior and the way the world, is played is, and what happens within it is as a result of players. Other players are the content and what you're doing. So the end game content is players, other players. I don't know, Flame, if you want to add more on that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think probably onboarding is a big question that comes up a lot in these things. I think one of the best things for onboarding is if new players are actually valuable to the world. And I think our system of like what Heinball was saying, as far as limiting the population deliberately, can help a lot with that. So ideally, for me, when a new player joins the world, there's people fighting over them to join their whatever, their corporation, their organization, their player-run city, because the new players have a really important role to fill.
Nice. All right, well, we're coming up on just about an hour here. I think we can end it with, well, Reform Bully, by the way, everything's getting replaced for V2, just so you know, in UI-wise. But we can end it with this question from Corsair. Do you think / want this game to evolve into landing ships on different worlds and having exploration or gameplay like that. Also,
No.
we want to
Spaceships.
launch the game at some point.
We don't want
So
to.
probably not.
Very outside the scope.
If someone else wants to do that through the DAO and people like it, fuck yeah. But no, we want to launch the game at some point. So probably not in our immediate future. And I don't think that's the type of game we really want to evolve into either. That's not the type of game I want personally. I think that's No Man's Sky already exists. I think we have a different focus on what we want to achieve and the type of game we want to have. So, but yeah, that's the AMA. Obviously, if you guys have more questions, you're always welcome. Just ping any of us in chat or post in the questions channel. We hang out basically every day, so always happy to answer and talk about whatever. But thanks, guys. Appreciate everyone who came and asked questions. Great show.
Yeah, thanks everybody for showing up. Appreciate the questions. Have a good week.
All right. Yeah. See you guys.
See ya.
See you all later.